Welcome to In the Ven Zone with Christine McKay, where we get candid about what it takes to negotiate effectively. You'll learn from the challenges and successes of entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. We help you change the nature of your negotiations and get more from every deal you do.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of In the Ven Zone. I know every time I come back on for a new episode, I always say almost this exact same thing. I am so excited about our guest today. And today is absolutely no exception. I have Meghan Gardner here with me today, and I am really genuinely excited. This is going to be an episode that's going to be unlike any of the other ones that you've listened to so far. Meghan has a very unusual background, and I want to give a little story or a little kind of body around why I think she's just an amazing person to have as a guest on In the Ven Zone, where we are talking about helping you as small business owners really level up your negotiations and be more successful in asking for more of what you want. So Meghan is the CEO and founder of this really cool organization called Guardian Adventures. And it is based off of live action role playing. And so if anybody knows LARPing, then you know it's, I always want to say what LARPing is. I've tried to describe it before, and I'll let Meghan do more of that. But she started this company 20 years ago almost. And when nobody was talking about it, and she's really been a pioneer in the education space, working with elementary school kids and high school kids, and then all the way into grown adult kids. So that it really is kind of this universal effort. And, you know, the pandemic has kind of been a pain in the neck for all of us, but I know it's been a real pain in the neck for Meghan, and she's had to have some changes in her business. But she also does things through, she works with the Harvard University in their education department and teaches a program or co-teaches a program there in every year. So she's got tons of insight from the educational space. But the other thing that makes Meghan really interesting is that she is just really dedicated and devoted to the work that she does in hospice care. So Meghan's unique perspective is that she has this incredible wealth of knowledge of how we negotiate with children as they are developing, as they are discovering what it is that they love to do, and how we as adults influence that, how we interact with them as well as the school system. So she has that perspective, but she also has this really amazing perspective on how we negotiate with ourselves and those around us as our lives are about to come to an end. Now, you may sit and think, what the hell does this have to do with my business? But we're going to get into that, because this, in my opinion, has everything to do with your business. And Meghan, I'm going to borrow your statement. You know, on our headstones when we die, we have the date we're born and the date we die, and our entire life is represented by that dash. And so Meghan is going to talk to us about bridging that gap, those gaps, and having that conversation. So Meghan, so glad to have you here. You are just like one of my favorite people on the planet, and I'm just honored to call you friend. So thank you for being here and supporting me in the Ven Zone, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Christine. And I was just reflecting, like, we've known each other 10, 15 years, I think.
10, yeah.
Yeah, it's been quite a while, and I think we both have gone through so much wonderful metamorphosis, and we understand the value of stories and relationships. And so I love watching what you've done and your comprehension around the idea that negotiation is actually about a relationship.
Yes.
And relationships, I think, are stories, my story and their story intersecting.
Exactly.
And trying to see how we can find how our stories can actually come together. And that's a lot about what I do, both with children and with largely the elderly, but not always. I've actually sat with people my age or even younger who are dying. And a lot of it is around in this area with the children. It's about uncovering their story and about having them find the voice of their own story and exploring it and trying to determine what their story will be. And in the end of life and hospice, it's about hearing their story and collecting
Mm-hmm.
it. And sometimes it's really powerful moments of receiving a story from them that, because I am this person coming in with no history with them, I'm a blank slate, and they are in this sacred space that they are going where none of us know afterwards for certain. They're prepared to divulge this story, and I
Mm.
can be the recipient of that. And what an amazing honor to be the recipient of these stories. And I like to say that in both situations, people are teaching me, the children are teaching me about all the possibility.
Mm.
And I can see in their eyes the world of possibility and opportunity in front of them. And that makes me feel kind of like that child in me, which is to look at life as this huge array of possibility and opportunity. Anything can happen. I can go
Mm.
anywhere. It's never too late, right? And
Right.
then on the other side, it's the when somebody is dying, I can look at them reflecting upon what really mattered in their life. And I'll tell you this, nobody has ever said to me they wish they spent more time at the office. Not a
Right.
single one.
Right.
Um, and I ask people over and over again, just because I am learning. I mean, that's the kind of this, I hate to say it's selfishness to me, but I love learning from the people who are dying, because I
Mm.
get, this is a wisdom that I think often we are, our society particularly, which is so death phobic, doesn't capitalize on, which is that the
Mm.
elderly particularly have this wisdom of having all this life experience, and often don't have anyone to pass this wisdom on to.
Mm.
And when you are in the space of dying, you, I think, have a clarity that is so rare in life, because we're so worried about what we're going to do next. You know, kind of like when we're younger, right? But when we're older, we let go of that. And instead, we can reflect back and say, this is what I value.
Mm.
And this is what I hold dear. And this is what I regret. And that's really, it always comes down to the people I love, the people who love me, and the regrets that I have. That's
Mm.
over and over. I hear that. On occasion, you'll hear somebody say, I have no regrets. But often people will say, I wish I'd done this, or I wish
Mm.
I hadn't done this. But it's usually, I wish I had done this.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
that's very interesting. I wish I had.
Yes.
Um,
More often than not, that's the one. I wish I had done this.
wow. So that, I mean, so you actually said a few things in there, picking up on some of the words that you said that I talk about a lot. So one is around clarity, right?
Mm,
So, as people are moving toward the end of life, then they develop this clarity. And how great would it be to
mm,
have clarity much earlier in life?
yeah. Yeah.
And in all that we do, right? I mean, I know, like, I look back on my life and there are just times when I go, oh, if I had had greater clarity, then I wouldn't
Mm,
have allowed myself to get moved off this path, right? It's kind of, it's circuitous how we get to where we're at. But that clarity is really important. And clarity is really important when you're negotiating with yourself as well as when you're negotiating with others. And that's kind of, so talk a little bit more about it. Before,
mm.
let's back up just a little though. Tell us how you got into these, like what we were talking about before we started recording, these bookends,
Yeah.
because you that's what makes what you do unique, at
Mm,
least to all the people I know, is that you sit in this bookend space, and
yeah.
usually people pick one or the other, focus in one of these areas or the other, and but you're sitting in both. And so tell us how you got into each
Mm,
of these things, because I think that
yeah.
that's fascinating.
You know, I was listening to your interview with Jillian Michaels, and you said something I thought, this is where Christine and I are like two peas in a pod. I am a lifelong student of myself,
Mm.
and I am constantly looking inside of myself for that clarity, to find out who. Well, I mean, it's not so much like who I am and what I want to do, as much as am I being my authentic self?
Mm.
And am I presenting my authentic self? And I feel often that if I can, that I move in a space of grace when I am authentic. And it's when I'm not, inevitably, is when I have regrets, is when I mess up. It's when I look back and I go, you know, I made a big mistake there. And that's because I was focused on other than my authentic self. And so through my life, the one thing I was able to identify when I was young was that I had an incredible imagination. And it really rather annoyed me that school wasn't more of a place to allow when you're younger, when you're in kindergarten, when you're in grade school, there's so much energy spent on creativity, on hands-on, and allowing a child the freedom to explore. And then we get into grade school, and we get into middle school, and we get into high school, and it seems to really narrow in, because now we have to get down to business and figure out what we're going to do for the rest of our life at the age of 12. And I felt like a lot of my life, I was being squeezed into a very specific, not necessarily a path, but like you have to start making decisions. And I was interested in so much.
Right.
You know, and I had a passion for things, but I had a passion for science, but I did terribly on the tests. But I loved science. And this conflict came up, and finally I gave it up. I did the minimum amount necessary for science, because I tell people the only thing that's more dangerous than an F in a class is a D. Because if I fail, I'm forced to take it again, and maybe I'll find something in it. But if I get a D, I will say I'm just bad at this, and I will never go back to it. So I was frustrated with education until I met an amazing educator who was my dungeon master in Dungeons and Dragons. I played Dungeons and Dragons as a kid, and there was an adult who was the head of our game club, and he was the dungeon master. And he put this ragtag group of friends through really challenging situations and with limited resources. And he was incredibly patient, and he was a nudger. He would just constantly nudge us to think differently. And we overcame so many interesting situations that it was exciting. It was invigorating to try to problem solve these somewhat real life type situations, as we had to work together with our own special skill sets to design a solution and learn to negotiate in the process. And I remembered every week, I just couldn't wait for Saturday, where I was learning in a style that was right for me, because it was in a story and I was playing a character, and by playing this character, I could try on different aspects of what this character was and what they were like. And if I didn't like it, or other people didn't like it, I could just blame it on the character. I said, well, that's my character, right? And as I got older, and I continued to play Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games and such, and I was really into fantasy novels and such, and I exercised some writing and my own artwork. I went to college hoping to become a video or a filmmaker, but what I realized was I wanted to not just tell stories like a filmmaker. I wanted to, and I didn't have the vocabulary for it then. I wanted to co-create stories with the audience. I wanted to actually participate where you and I, even though I have these resources and you are my guest, we are co-creating a story together. And isn't that an incredibly powerful experience for both of us? And in doing that, you have to learn, what do you want? What do I want? And then how do we make this relationship work in this incredibly dynamic and imaginative environment?
Right.
And so I found that in LARP, live action role playing. And I stumbled upon this, and I immediately recognized as a powerful tool for education. So I hired some teachers from this LARP, and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to put something like this together for kids. And largely I did this because my own girls were of the age where they were interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that just blossomed, because what child does not want to be a sword fighter who's fighting a dragon when they're little?
And gets to wear fun costumes.
Gets to design a character and be the hero they see on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And we collaboratively created this beautiful world called Seidel Terra. And Seidel, it was actually a name that Marin, my oldest daughter, came up with. Seidel means to step sideways, and Terra means earth. So it's the idea based in old European folklore that if at these moments of day, at dusk or dawn or twilight, you step sideways around a specific she mound, you will step into the land of Fae. And in the land of Fae, it's this magical realm. So I thought, this is perfect. It's called Seidel Terra. So we created this world that was the intersection of myth and history and literature. And we made it the training ground for heroes. So when you enter this world as a child, you are now a hero. In fact, you're called heroes. You're not called campers. You're not called students. You are called a hero. And this realm was set up by the spirits. And the spirits, the greater spirits, are all designed after Joseph Campbell's archetypes on the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so and they could manifest in any number of ways, because we didn't want to glue all these stories to just Eurocentric stories like, King Arthur and Knights of the Round Table. We instead want to explore the world stories. So we have actually hired on cultural consultants from Native Americans. They were actually on staff for a whole year, and they would help us represent their culture's stories in a way that is culturally sensitive and appropriate. They had to approve all of our props and costumes. Sometimes they played a role in the camp, so that the kids could see that the world stories are actually our stories. And even though you're hearing a story from somebody who speaks a different language, they have different color skin, they're wearing different clothes, the stories are the same. We all have the same stories. You know this in negotiation.
Yeah. I mean, I want to spend a moment on that, because I think that's really, for me, in my experience and my journey, right? I've negotiated in 53 countries. Right. And, when I teach multicultural negotiation, because I don't like calling it multinational, because culture changes by latitude and longitude.
Yes, it does.
Right. And so as soon as you change latitude and or longitude, there's a cultural change, and being aware of that cultural change is really important. And so I think that, and especially in the United States, we don't spend enough time appreciating different cultures, either within the United States,
right,
or certainly outside the United States. And so I love, and my dad grew up on a reservation in Montana. And so my grandmother spent most of her life there. And so I really appreciate that you have this sensitivity to culture. And oftentimes when I teach multicultural negotiations, I use Stephen Ambrose's Undaunted Courage, because the Lewis and Clark expedition negotiated with over 20 native tribes as they traversed the United States. Some of them played out better than others. And so it just is an emphasis that culture changes based on latitude and longitude. And so I love that you brought the world cultures into it, and the stories are the same. And because at the end of the day, everybody who's listening, I don't care what part of the world you are in, we're all people, and we all care about the exact same things. We want to be loved. We want to be loving. We want to contribute positively to society, and we want to make society a better place. We want to, if we have children and we want to raise them, we want them to be loved. Right. We want roof over our head and food on our table. And our basic needs of emotion, and even the physical things that are basic needs, are common across the entire world.
Right.
But we spend so much time focusing on what's different about us.
That's
in
right.
in our conversations, what's different. And then we forget to look for those things that are common. And you were
Right.
talking before we started recording, we were talking, and you can comment on this now, or we can kind of park it and hopefully come back to it if we don't get sidetracked, because sometimes that happens. But you were talking about kind of the negotiation, the role of a negotiator that a parent has
Mm,
between a child and the school.
mm.
And I think because you're at that cultural aspect kind of plays into that.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to talk about that now, if you want to
Sure.
park that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good segue. I think and this is particularly directed to parents, is that I think as parents we forget that our role is that bridge between our child and the school. And in being that, we sometimes think we are championing our child with the school system. And sometimes we forget to check in with the child and what the
Mm,
child wants and what they're motivated by. And I see this a lot because as a parent, I can tell you this is a constant struggle. We want what's best for our children.
yeah.
And what the stumbling block is when we think we know what's best because we see our child 20 years down the road. And let me tell you, this is true even when we have adult children. And we make
Absolutely.
that mistake of giving
Yeah.
advice to our adult children without remembering that when we were 20 something years old, how did we take advice from our parents, right?
Just so everybody, so all of our listeners know, Megan and I both have adult children. So now we're sitting here to having that chuckle to each other. So hers
Yes.
are in their late 20s, right? And
Mine
mine
are
are,
mid to mid 20s, mid late
yeah, and
20s.
mine are in their mid 30s.
Yes.
So yeah, so
Yep.
that's what we're talking
Yep.
about.
Yeah. And it's funny because though, and this is, they thankfully are understanding, because I've explained to them, my biggest challenge is that nature has wired me to want to take care of you and to protect you. Literally, when you are in my arms as a child, I am neurologically wired to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't change.
Right.
There's nothing that nature gave me. There's no little switch to flip when you become an adult that says, oh, you don't need to do that anymore.
Right. Exactly.
No. Instead, I, as the parent, have to go, yeah, I got to shut up now because they need to figure this out on their own. And even though I am absolutely certain I know the outcome of this move they're going to make, instead, I need to be their champion to do what they think is right to do. And if they fail, be there to help pick them up and keep going.
Absolutely.
And to empathize with them and say, I messed up too when I was your age.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And it's not to say to them, don't do this because this is what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because they at the same time that we're wired to protect them, they're actually wired to pull away and to forge their own path. And so, yeah, I'll get off my soapbox on that one. That's my little thing right now that I am personally working through, which is learning to shut up with my kids, or when to shut up.
I actually asked my kids, do you want me to listen, or do you
Yes.
want me to help you problem solve?
Yes.
And they've taught me that I need to ask that question.
That's good though, because
It's a big thing, because
yeah,
otherwise my natural inclination is to try to dive in and help problem solve, and
right.
sometimes they just need to vent.
That's exactly right.
Right, sometimes they literally just want
Right.
to offload, and so they have been training me to ask that question.
Isn't and you know what, we as parents, we need to look at that and go, and that's enough, because
It
your
is.
child is willing to be vulnerable with you and to just
Absolutely.
unload out with you, and we need to be able to go, this is enough. I am still a good parent just
Absolutely.
receiving this.
And I mean, just kind of, and bringing this back into business, to be a good manager
Mm,
is very
yes.
much the same skill set.
Yes, it is.
If you have somebody on your team who comes to you and is just frustrated and angry and just upset, and they start to offload, don't dive into problem solve.
I know.
Ask them, how do you want me to be here for
Right.
you?
And that,
right, that if
exactly,
you, as a manager, your stock price as a manager will go through the roof if you create that kind of, if you negotiate that kind of a relationship with your team. And
right.
you know, in my experience, you have similar situations that happen throughout business, whether you're talking with customers, suppliers, employees, or investors, where when people get really agitated and they're coming to you, not because you are the source of the agitation, but because they either want you to give them advice or they want you to listen. Ask which role they want you to play.
That's
and
right.
then play the role that they need you to play, not
That's
the
right.
role that you want to play.
That's right. And you know, it's the same. I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but just as for to talk about afterwards, it's the same in hospice. You know, when I knock on the door and to go in to see my patient, I have to let go of everything I think they want. I literally have to leave it at, I have a little meditation I do before I walk through that door. I'm outside the door. I'm going in here to receive what they need and to be available to them, to talk to me, because sometimes they don't feel like they can talk to the doctor or to the nurse or even to the chaplain. And that's why volunteers are so important, because we can be that person without any agenda. I don't have a spiritual agenda. I don't have a social worker's agenda. I don't have a doctor or a nurse's agenda. I'm that one person on the team who has no agenda. And that is vital at end of life, because we will often be the person that they give the answers to of what they need. And then we can help pass that on to the team, who can then collaborate to make that happen for them. So
to kind of bridge the two, and tell me if you think that this is kind of not on point, but when you have a child, right, you have this ultimate desire to give to your child.
yeah.
Right, as your child starts to get older, they need you to switch that role to be more receiving.
Yes.
Then at end of life, it is all about being a receiver.
Yes,
Right, the
without a
person
doubt.
who's passing is giving everything that they can give right now, because that's they're trying to get it all out.
Right.
And the greatest gift you can give to a person at that stage is to be a complete receptacle for what it is.
Yeah.
So this conversation around giving and receiving, I was just at an event earlier in December, and we essentially spent almost 2 days talking about giving and receiving, which, when you think about negotiation, right, negotiation, you know, as you and I've talked, is for me nothing more than a conversation about a relationship.
Right.
And you can't win a relationship.
Right.
But all relationships are giving, are a structure, a construct of giving and receiving. And so what you're talking about very much, it's all that negotiation. And this is why, to our listeners, this is why, you know, you hear a lot of people, not just me, but certainly me, but others who are professional negotiators or count themselves as professional negotiators, say everything is negotiable, because everything is being negotiated. Whether you realize it or not, you are negotiating. And it's this whole concept and this unspoken contract of giving and receiving that actually is driving that negotiation. And you're doing it with your kids, you're doing it if you're doing elder care, you know, you're doing it all the time in your business and in your personal.
Right. Yeah. And I was just thinking, to go back to our relationship with our children when they're younger, this is, I think, where we begin to start to learn the art of negotiation. Because, you know, trying to get a child to do what they don't want to do, you know, if we want to take the less authoritarian approach and more a collaborative approach to help them feel that they have some control in the situation, then it is a lot about negotiation then. And it's a lot about finding out what it is they want in the situation. In education, I did a lot of reading and a lot of listening and a lot of talking with educators and with students. And one thing that I found really interesting was video games. Video games have this incredible allure to people that it can be like beyond powerful. It can be to the point of addiction. But it's also has a specific allure to it. And I was like, what is that specific allure, especially for children? And through a lot of different resources and studies and discussions, I came to the understanding that it was 3 ingredients and to each person participating, those 3 ingredients each one had a varying degree of impact on a person, but it always came down to three ingredients. The first was autonomy. When a child sits down to play in a video game, they are the one who can decide what to do and where to go and what path to take. And if it's as an immersive, massively multiplayer game, I'm actually putting on an outfit. I'm deciding a character to play. I'm deciding my backstory. I'm deciding what special powers I have. There's a lot of autonomy built in this. And for a child who feels like they don't have a lot of autonomy in their life outside of video games, that can be the greatest allure, is because this is that outlet for that autonomy. Now, a subset under autonomy, it's not one of the 3 because it's a type of autonomy, is agency. And agency is for those who are big on autonomy, agency is this sort of extra flavor of autonomy where not only do I have the ability to navigate and decide where I'm going through this environment, but I have a direct influence on the outcome. I actually have the ability to change the world I'm navigating. Wow, that's an immense amount of power there. So there's agency. So we have autonomy with agency under that. The second thing, and this is really illustrated by how brilliantly video games do this with their little power bars up at the top of the screen and the various treasures you find and the skills you accrue. And that's a sense of progress. And even more than a sense of progress, I would add a tangible sense of progress, something that's very obvious to me. It's not just this feeling of I'm getting better at this. I can point to something specific that says I am actually getting better. I have this many more experience points. I have this many more spells. I have gotten this much closer to going up against the big boss. Okay, so that's that tangible sense of progress. And then the last one, and this varies depending upon the person and whether or not they feel they fit in, is a sense of belonging. And I would say that even people who feel they don't fit in, they desire a sense of belonging. They just haven't found where they fit in yet. I think it's innate, and I think you even name this as it's in the hierarchy of needs. We all feel a need to belong. And massively multi-user games have this because we are all in this environment and we are all, for the duration of this game, agreeing to do one of the most powerful things that human beings can do, which is to suspend our disbelief. So all together, we are in this world where we actually believe that this collection of pixels in front of us matters. What's happening in this pretend environment actually matters, so much so that I'll get pissed off when it doesn't go my way, and I'll get incredibly excited when we beat the big bad boss, right?
Yes.
So, and you can see that even people who aren't into video games, you can see that in the movie theater. The last time we were in a movie theater, eons ago. And you're sitting shoulder to shoulder with people you don't know. And you're in a really good movie. And here comes that action scene where the hero just is on the edge. You're on the edge of your seat. You don't know whether or not, you kind of know they're probably going to survive, but you're like right there, right? And here comes the big act, and the music's all coming up to the top and everything's, and then it resolves and the lights come up. And sometimes people are clapping at a movie, but we're not clapping for the movie. We're clapping for each other. We're actually clapping because we all have just experienced this profound moment where for the span of the last 2 hours, we each individually were that hero. And we experienced what they experienced. That suspension of disbelief is so powerful. And a good story does that for us. It puts us right there.
So that you hit on a lot of things. So one, it's interesting. So not many of my listeners know, but my husband actually works in Hollywood and he works in animation.
Right.
And he actually says one of the worst things he ever did for his appreciation for movies was to start to work in Hollywood, because he no longer has the ability to suspend disbelief.
Yep.
Right, to suspend disbelief. It's like he knows what's going on behind the curtains. It's like the magic is kind of gone. Yeah, right. And so it's very hard for a movie to capture. So he feels a little cheated by that.
Yeah.
But because I always bring everything back to kind of how negotiation works, right? But what you're talking about is all negotiation.
That's right.
It is how I often say that negotiation, when you're negotiating with somebody, you are entering into that agreement because you have the hope of having a better future, whether it's a future together, working together, or a future apart if it's a relationship that needs to be dissolved and you need to make way for newer, more effective relationships. But these stories are what help bridge us to that point, and without them we don't have the opportunity we don't give ourselves the opportunity to build and identify common ground and then to build upon them for the greater good being, you and I, or you and me, or the greater good being a bigger collective of people. So I only play one video game on the planet because my husband ruined me. And if it's not Zelda Breath of the Wild, it isn't getting my attention. So Nintendo, would you please hurry up and bring me a new version? I played Breath of the Wild to death.
You know what? I don't play video games. I studied them for this, but once you put on a costume and you go out and you actually live the character with children, who, by the way, suspend disbelief like that,
right?
There's no comparison.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
It's so powerful to be out there in that environment where they are right there with you as co-creators. And it's an exciting process that you can watch build upon itself. So because the other thing is that we do in our projects is that we don't what's called railroad the kids through the story. We don't put them on a track and say, here's your story, you're going this way.
Video games, they do that. They have to. Right.
Right. Well, some of the more elaborate video games actually have a sandbox mentality, where literally in some of these games, you could play a character who sits and fishes all day, and they will make it interesting. They will have various characters come up and sit down next to you and interact with you. You may just watch different animals come in, sip at the edge of the lake, or a fish jump. They'll have all kinds of interesting things happening so that you can just sit and fish for the entire day. So that idea of a sandbox, that there is no specific agenda that I have to have going into the game, and the game doesn't have a specific agenda for me other than to entertain me.
Yeah.
So this sense of progress may not be at that moment important to the participant. Maybe they don't want to rack up points. Maybe they just want to hang out and be in this environment where they have a sense of belonging and watch what's going on. And it could be just them exercising their autonomy, that, you know what, I want to do nothing more than sit here and fish. And isn't that wonderful that they can create that? We actually go a step further in our programs. So we present the first day of the story to the children, and then we watch what they do, and we co-create the next days all through summer with them. So literally sometimes that night we pull in our plot team, we pull in our counselors and the people who are with the kids. We deconstruct what they want, what they think is happening, where we think we can take them with this, what kind of challenges we can put in. And sometimes, and usually that night, we're writing the plot for them the next day So that night we're writing the next day's plot. And sometimes we're making the props and the costumes the next day for the next day. It's elaborate, it's exhausting. But when you have a truly co-creative environment with kids, they will never feel more empowered because they are making the world with you as you present it to them. And that's even more exciting than a video game, which has an established world that I can navigate, even though it is a sandbox. I only have specific things. I mean, I remember one time the kids intersected one of our staff people who really just needed to get from point A to point B and bring some admin paperwork with him. He threw on a farmer's hat. He's trying to quietly book across the quad to get over there. And the kids, hey, you, and ran over and started talking with him. He's like, and he goes, I'm Farmer Joe. And they're like, well, where are you coming from? Where are you going? And he had to come up with a story right on the spot. And so he made up a story that his wife died. And he is going to get the paperwork put in so that he can get her headstone installed so that she doesn't rise from the dead. And they're like, they're rising from the dead if they don't have a headstone? Where is this cemetery? And of course, we don't have a cemetery. So he comes back in and he goes, guys, so we have a problem. Kids want to go to the cemetery. We don't have that night. We are up carving out of foam headstones, painting them, carving names into them, and putting them in the ground in the middle of the night, so that when the kids woke up, they had a cemetery.
Oh wow! I mean, and what I love about that, and this is an area where I think that I wish more people would explore. It goes back to kind of what we talked about earlier, that when people are in conversations, we shut down the opportunity to explore possibilities.
Yes.
And we do that because we ask ineffective questions. And we're going to have you on a different show because Megan's doing this whole big research project on questioning, and there's somebody I want to introduce you to, one of my mentors, Blair Dunkley. And so when she's done with that and she has her book, which she's been working on for a little while now, it's coming soon, we're going to have Megan back on again to talk specifically about that. But I think the thing that we as adults, when we are in negotiation, especially in business, but not just in business, like in the Jillian Michaels show, right? Jillian and I talked about, she's struggling right now with, a custody issue with her ex-partner, and is really struggling. And I said this to her on the show. I was like, Jillian, you think in terms of win and lose.
Yes.
You think about relationships in terms of winning and losing. You don't think about things in terms of possibilities. Yeah. And in negotiating, if we are to move ourselves forward, to take us into, 2021 and beyond, and you see how people earlier in their careers, Gen Z, millennials, how they think differently from us. These concepts come into play. They are trying to figure out, how do I? There's got to be more, and so how do we find more? And we find more by allowing people to put on the costumes, to carve the headstones, and in the pretend cemetery, so that somebody who doesn't have so everyone has a headstone, so they don't rise from the dead. And you start with what's possible,
right?
And you create an attitude of abundance, that there is more. Like everybody can partake in the more, right? Instead of this scarcity position that we so often take, especially in American culture, but in Western culture. And
I will step away from that stump.
But children are, and you mentioned it earlier, we start learning to negotiate. We actually learn to negotiate as children. And for most of us, we are still the same negotiator today as adults that we were when we were children. So if you were a kid who threw temper tantrums, you still are throwing temper tantrums. And if you were a kid who hid behind your mom's skirts or shut yourself in your bedroom and put your pillow over your head, you are still doing that in some way, shape, or form, and everything in between. And so how we negotiate as kids is how we tend to negotiate as adults, because nobody teaches us how to negotiate any differently. And the stories that we create, we limit ourselves, and we don't give each other the opportunity to explore all these possibilities. How does that kind of, as you kind of moving into kind of later in life, how does that kind of come full circle? How do you see some of those themes playing out in hospice? And how do we bring that whole learning back into the dash between the birth year and our death?
As you were saying something, it occurred to me. So, and I haven't thought this all the way through, so help me work this out.
I'll explore it.
When we negotiate, and we touched on how we want to present our authentic self, right? And our authentic needs. But that, what's holding us back is that is an incredibly vulnerable moment.
Absolutely.
We are opening up and putting our needs right out there to be discussed. And the idea that we may not get what we need is terrifying. And so, especially because vulnerabilities have this specific blockade called shame.
Yes.
We have a lot in this, especially in this society, of shame built up. Yeah. And shame is built up sometimes around identity, the idea that I am bad instead of I did bad. And therefore, and we handle our shame by burying it. Yes. We don't talk about it. We put it away. And unfortunately, when we do that, we can never access our authentic selves. And it is, what shame doesn't survive is the light of awareness and bringing that out to share with some trusted confidants or a therapist. Bring that out and talk it out and put it out there so that we can begin to see that it's not this huge, ugly bear that lives inside of us in the darkening cellar chained up, but it's actually what's called being human. And that thing we don't want to do.
Yeah.
And so, and it was occurred to me as you were talking about that's true, because a lot of what children are being taught as they get older is that their authentic selves, their needs are not important, because what's more important is that I get to work on time, not that you are able to tuck your mittens inside of your sleeves and delay me getting you in the car and dropping you off at school. I have to get to work on time. And so they have to, and I'm not saying, you're gonna have people listening who are gonna go, well, if you don't teach a child to compromise, then they're going to grow up spoiled. So, but that compromise there, that's the negotiation. Okay, that's where saying, you know what, your needs matter, and so do mine. And so we have to learn how to negotiate those moments, as opposed to just saying, enough. My needs are more important than yours.
Well, and I know that when I think back about myself as a parent, and I think pretty much every time I talk to my daughters, I apologize for some aspect of being a parent. And I mean, I look at my daughters, and we did a good job. Keith and I did a very good job as parents. And our daughters believe we did a good job, but we made a lot of mistakes.
Oh, heck yes.
We all do. And in fact, I think my youngest daughter was probably 9, and she did something wrong. And I said, well, it's not like there's a manual on how to raise you. And guess what I had the next morning? I had a manual on how to raise Danielle McKay. It's like, she wrote it for me. She illustrated it.
Oh, man. You have that? Oh, what a treasure.
But that's the thing, though. I mean, she, at the age of 9,
Mm.
took that as an invitation. Now, and I say this all the time too, except when it comes to sex. No is an invitation to ask different questions,
Yes.
right? So that's what she did. She's like, all right, well, then I'm just, if that's the part you're missing and you don't have that, then I'll just write it for you and then you'll know, kind of thing. But in our business relationships, we don't give each other the opportunity
That's
to
right.
do that. I mean, so many times, I mean, I've negotiated with hundreds and hundreds of companies, almost half the Fortune 500. And it's like we get into this rote kind of way of doing things. It's like we do A, then B, then C, then D, and we don't have a lot of tolerance for people. There isn't, we teach kids at a young age to color in the lines.
Right.
And then the lines get more rigid and more intricate as we get older. And now what we do to our kids is just mind boggling to me. You know, I was talking to somebody who's like, yeah, I played football, or I was a swimmer. So I was at the pool at 4 a.m. And I'm like, what
I
the
know.
dickens? I'm like, I couldn't,
Yeah.
so it's like we just expect, not only do we expect them to color in between color in the lines, within the lines, we expect them to color within the lines in more intricate and complicated
Right.
patterns with every
Right.
passing year.
Right.
But you know what? There's a lot of value to coloring outside the line.
There is.
And
There is.
and it's like, white space doesn't need to be white space.
Right.
And our best ideas come from playing around on the edges and playing outside the margins and exploring what's possible outside of those boundaries and those barriers, right?
Mm.
And so in our business relationships, part of what makes really successful business relationships is being willing to explore what that looks like and how you can create that different kind of a relationship.
Yeah. I think another part of it is to understand what motivates somebody. And that's largely what's missing from education. Because
and negotiation, yes.
Right. I mean, I really believe that you have an entire field of negotiation in education. And that process is negotiating between the schools and a child, or a parent and the school, just so that schools can understand, or I should say the policymakers can understand, that we have to have a systemized approach. I get it, because we're talking about millions and millions of kids. You have to have some kind of system, but the system has to flex. And it can't be one way of finding out if you're succeeding, just one way, and that's those standardized tests. So I'll give you an example, which is Marin, my oldest, who is now today a successful artist. And she, when she was younger, I taught her very young. I taught her how to draw, and she loved it. She immediately loved it. And then she wanted to draw dragons. And so I showed her how to draw some dragons with like a squiggle, and how to turn that into a dragon. Well, that was it. All she wanted to do was draw dragons. And I remember when I was little, all I wanted to do was draw comic book characters. I wanted to draw superheroes. And I was told that that wasn't mature. That's not real art. And so I was told that you can do that in your free time, but that's not what this is about. That's not real art. And it really disappointed me. And it turned me off to the idea of art. And so I decided that with Marin, I was going to instead take the approach that dragons are the most important thing in the world to you right now. You need to do as much art about that as you want. But here's the thing. I'm going to ask for you to take that dragon and put it in the woods. Put some trees around it. Show me what a woodland dragon looks like. And so she started to have to focus on drawing some trees. And then an underwater dragon. And now, well, can you show me a dragon in color? How about pastel? How about watercolor? How about painting? Then it was, can you put a person on the back of the dragon? What would that be like to have a pet dragon? And so she started to learn anatomy of people because she wanted to have a really authentic looking person on the back of the dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And it was through that, through her passion of dragons, that she started to explore different medium of art, different environments, different subject matter. I remember one time she had to do a still life in high school, and she just thought it was the most boring thing. She hid a dragon in it. She slightly put the shading and hid a dragon that she pointed out was brilliant. It was beautiful. And today she owns a company. She's global clients. During this pandemic, she's thriving as an independent artist. And her logo is a dragon. And on every single piece of art that she makes is her stamp of a little dragon. So still today, she has a dragon on every one of her pieces of art. So, and I use that story to help parents understand that. I mean, I remember because Marin also had some proclivity towards engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And so she would actually try to figure out scientifically, how do dragons work? How do they produce fire? How do they fly? They'd have to have really big wings. And she came up with this whole idea how they inflate these airbags inside of themselves to lighten their body, that their wings would bend, their bones must have been hollow like birds, because that would make them light enough to fly. And she would criticize seeing dragons on the film that had small wings. And she's like, no, it's just, please don't say it's just magic. There has to be a reason. And I love that she was bringing her imagination to play in reality. Mm-hmm. And she was using that love of dragons to foster her passion for engineering and for science, because it turns out that she does a lot of engineering with her art today. Mm. So she used her passion for dragons to bridge the gap between art and science. And even my youngest, Gwen, she's a particle physicist. And she can tell you how her ability to see shapes in her head and to visualize outside the box painting allows her to think differently. Because I'll tell you, the level of particle physics, that's a whole different level of science and thought. I mean, yeah, you're dealing with I can only philosophically wrap my head around it. Scientifically, wow. So you have to be able to think really differently. And she says that she believes that that's an influence of her artistic mind, that she can grasp those things.
That's amazing. And I mean, I think that kind of just bringing that full circle, and we're about out of time. So yeah. I know you have a gift that for the audience and for the listeners, and I want people to know how that they can get in touch with you and follow you. But I mean, I think there's just been so much in what we've talked about today. And, I hope that, to our listeners, one, thank you so much for tuning in and listening with us. But I hope you listen to this again, because there are just lots of little nuggets that, while on the surface may not appear to be applicable to what you're doing in your day-to-day business, there are lessons in here and concepts in here that you can extrapolate to apply to your business and to every one of your relationships, whether it's a professional relationship or a personal relationship. And I think kind of one of the big things is, how you bring possibilities to the fore, and how you give and receive in your relationships. And those things combined will make a massive difference in how you move forward in your business. So tell us a little bit, Meghan. You have a gift for our staff, which is for our listeners, which is really cool, guys. This is pretty cool.
this is for those companies or families that are distanced from each other at this time of social distance. As it's a gift of a virtual escape room that you can get for free by signing on to guardup.net. That's GUARDUP.net. If you go there, you will find our learning platform and the Guardian Adventures learning platform. You get onto the platform, sign up, it's free. There is a free zombie adventure escape room.
So
And this escape room isn't something you go in and play. It's actually something that walks you through how to run it. So you get all of the digital assets, you get videos that show you how to run it, and you can run it not just for kids, you can actually run it for adults too. You could run it for your family, you could run it for your team at work. It can be a great bonding experience. And the neat thing is it can be done over Zoom. It can be done remotely. But take the time to go through it, take the course, download the assets, set it up, and you get to run the escape room for your family or for your coworkers and play with it. And that's really have fun with it. Don't feel like you have to don't railroad people right through to the end result. Create a sandbox and play with it and get creative. You will have so much fun with each other, because playtime, and we could do another whole talk on this, which is just how essential playtime is in the workplace, just for creativity and for bonding.
Oh, I know you actually have a quote in Forbes about playtime.
Yes.
So Meghan is on all sorts of things. She's part of the Forbes, one of the Forbes.
Yeah, the Forbes Boston Business. I'm one of the founding members of the Forbes Boston Business Council, and a number of other organizations. But you can find me on LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn/GuardUp. GuardUp was the original name of our company. It's now the parent company for Guardian Adventures. And what we do is we specialize in emotionally immersive experiences. So we're not just about doing these educational events and stuff. We're about taking whatever you are working with, whether that's corporate training, or if one of our clients is Royal Caribbean, we create online we create onboard adventures for their families. But what we specialize is in how do we get people emotionally engaged and immersed in the activity that they're doing. And that comes from negotiation and understanding their motivation.
Absolutely. Awesome. So, and I just want to thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the listeners. Just a real quick thing. My first book is about to come out. I am so excited. Why not ask a conversation about getting more? I will put the link in the show notes to all the things that Meghan was just sharing, as well as a link to pre-order the book. As well, we are launching our Venn Masters program, which we have talked about in a few different places, but check it out. All the information is in the show notes. I can't wait to see you guys next time. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. We are honored that you have given us the benefit of your most valuable asset. And just remember that negotiation is nothing more than a conversation about a relationship, and you cannot win a relationship. Till next time on In the Venn Zone, have a great day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Venn Zone with Christine McKay. We invite you to visit our website at www.venn.zone to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Empower the negotiator in you and successfully level the playing field. Join us again next time here on In the Venn Zone.